Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the February Cabinet meeting. And apologies for being a little bit late this morning. My name is Councillor Miliel. I'm the leader of the council, and I'll be sharing the meeting today. My deputy, Councillor Mike Cox, will be joining us online. I'd like to welcome members of the public who have given up their time to be with us here today, and of course to Cabinet members and other councillors who are in the room and online. First of all, I'm going to hand over to Democratic Services Officer Sarah to go over the housekeeping for today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building in Bourne Avenue. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move on to agenda item 1, which is apologies. We haven't received any today. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. I haven't had any raised in advance of the meeting, but if there are any to add, I can't see any, or if any come up, then please do indicate during that item. Agenda item 3 is the confirmation of minutes. That was the last meeting of Cabinet, which was held on the 15th of January. Is there someone to propose those?
Yes, happy to propose those, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. And someone second?
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Is there unanimous agreement that everything is fine with the minutes? I'm seeing nods. Thank you. Right, so agenda item 4 is public issues. There haven't been any petitions or questions submitted from members of the public on this occasion, but there has been one statement received from Susan Stockwell, and I can see Susan in the room here. Susan, would you like to come up and give your statement, please?
Please do not approve this budget unless you are absolutely certain that it will allow all of BCP's statutory duties in your area of responsibility to be met in full. From the evidence of my own eyes, I do not believe this to be the case in many areas at present. I am not asking for gold-plated taps, but for water to come out in more than a drip when turned on.
Thank you very much, Susan. So we're moving on to agenda item 5, and this is the recommendations from overview and scrutiny boards and committees that are not otherwise included on the agenda. I am just going to see if we have any chairs who would like to report anything from their committees. I have had apologies from Councillor Bartlett and Councillor Carr-Brown today. However, I just want to see if Councillor Rigby would like to say anything on this item.
Nothing from me, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rigby. And just to add as well, I have had apologies from Councillor Canavan. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 6, which is the budget 2025 and 26 medium-term financial plan. I'm going to be proposing this item, and that is because Councillor Cox is online, so he is not able to propose it. Can I see if there is someone to second this one?
I'll second, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Right, over to you, Councillor Cox, to present the report.
Thank you, Leader, and apologies for not being there in person. I just wanted to start really by thanking Adam Richards and his team, led by Nicola Webb and Matt Filmer, for the huge amount of work that they have put into this report and the appendices, all 260 odd of them. It's a mammoth task, not helped, of course, by last-minute changes by the central government. This year's budget and medium-term financial plan is really a story in two parts. On the one hand, we have the abomination, which is the funding of SEND services, demanding the council keeps deficits off the balance sheet while deliberately underfunding a statutory service is perverse, if not a deception. It would not be permitted in any other sector. As outlined in the report, a proverbial Rubicon has been crossed, and if you know your Roman history, then you know that's not a good thing. With the accumulated deficits from SEND now beginning to dwarf the council's reserves. Since the middle of May, we have been asking, if not begging, central government for advice on what to do about our cash flow issue. It took months for them to even understand the cash flow implications that we faced. We've lobbied MPs, ministers, the LGA. We put forward our own suggestions of ways we could make the SEND expenditure meet the income provided, all of which were illegal, unfortunately, and all bar one unacceptable to us. The one being, of course, that we withhold the government share of the business rates, which seemed perfectly fair to us. They rejected all of our suggestions and suggested instead that we apply for a capitalisation directive, as though we had made some bad decisions, like, for instance, trying to sell off beach huts. We fought back hard, demanding that if this was the only alternative, then we had conditions. And those conditions were that no MRP would be payable, saving us about £5 million. No strings attached, like external reviews, and the direction be renamed SEND Capitalisation Directive, and finally that any interest would be funded by central government. These were agreed to largely, except that the interest which they wanted added to the capital, except that they wouldn't pay the interest that was added to the Capitalisation Directive. Having negotiated hard, maybe perhaps too hard, the government decided only a week ago that, oh no, you don't want to do that. So with a week to go before our budget, they decided we can borrow on the markets rather than actually having a capitalisation directive. Another mind-blowing contravention of all accounting principles to aid a short-term crisis. We have demanded they put their advice in writing, which they have, and further, we have taken advice from both external auditors and CITFA, both of which have confirmed in writing that this is our only and our best option. So that deals with the SEND issue. On the other hand, we have a general fund which is balanced over 4 years, despite being landed with £11.5 million additional costs by the government in terms of the higher national insurance contributions and a higher national living wage awards. A breach of a specific promise by our ministers and reassurances by those close to him. Council tax will go up by 4.99%, in line with nearly every other local authority in the country, but significantly less than at least 6 other authorities who will see increases of 7.5% to 10%. And of course, a fraction of the increase wanted by a Conservative-run Hampshire, led by a former Bournemouth Conservative, who wanted a 15% increase. We will be implementing a £7.8 million of further savings as set out in Appendix 5A, a significant proportion of which represents increases in fees and charges and efficiency savings, not service reductions. We will provide £6.5 million in extra resources to cover demand and inflationary pressures on children's services, and we will provide £14.4 million of extra resources to cover demand and inflationary pressures on wellbeing services. There are key assumptions within this budget, which include a 2.8% pay increase, which was higher than we were budgeting for last year. Continuing utilisation of the one-off business rate collections to fund things like the regeneration activity and the externalisation of the Russell Coast Museum. The risks we face are significant, and these are well set out in the Section 25 report by the Section 151 officer. There are contingencies and provisions and reserves to deal with such risks that we face. We mess with these at our peril. This budget continues to protect our cultural and community development budgets. We continue investing in our highways and street cleaning, and we are modernising our fleet to be more climate friendly. So, Cabinet members, let's not forget what we inherited just 2 years ago, or less than 2 years ago, and what we have achieved so far. We inherited a best value notice and a sit for resilience review because of non-traditional approaches to budgets, risky assumptions and downright dodgy schemes. The Three Towns Alliance administration is the first and only council to have such a notice removed within 12 months. We inherited a children's services rated as inadequate, with underinvestment and inadequate priority for improvement. BCP directors and staff have worked brilliantly with the active support of the administration and has achieved what few others have, i.e. a 2-level improvement to good. We had a big plan designed to soothe egos and promote political ambitions, which has now been replaced by a corporate strategy which puts people and places at the heart of our services. And we had an underinvested homelessness strategy, which had nearly 100 families staying in B&B accommodation, where we now have none. A groundbreaking achievement which must be the envy of many councils up and down the country. In 2024, we set a budget which rescued the finances of BCP Council from a budget addicted to drawing £30 million a year from reserves. It was a tough budget, which we are still delivering on, but there is more to do. In 2025, this budget is really a steady as she goes budget. It deals with the fundamentals and shies away from any gimmicks so loved by the previous administration. So therefore, Cabinet, I would recommend that we recommend to Council that we agree the points A to F as set out in the papers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cox, for introducing that paper, and also for all the work that you and our Chief Finance Officer, along with all staff across the council, have done in creating this budget. I am just going to see if there are any councillors in the room or online who are not on Cabinet who would like to speak on this item. Councillor Farquhar, if you'd like to come up.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the opportunity to address Cabinet. I echo Councillor Canavan's apologies, and I won't deliver quite the panache and intelligence of Councillor Canavan. I commend the administration on the budget. It was a very, very difficult situation, and I know there are some councillors in the room that have lived through that. My question is relating to a service cut as opposed to service reduction, and that relates to the camera car. It's obviously been highlighted that this is the additional savings, and they are much appreciated. But it would be remiss of me, since my ward has a variety of issues with illegal parking in enforceable areas, which so don't appear to be getting addressed by the normal parking enforcement methods, e.g. foot patrols, etc. My question is this, is that looking through the papers, I see that the savings proposed to be 11,000. I'd just like to understand from a public's perspective how that 11,000 has come about, in that e.g. it wasn't wiping its own nose. It's kind of difficult to understand that we couldn't pull in £11,000 worth of revenue that could go to enforcement and additional protections for a highway from illegal parking. The other question which I have is that do we have more than one? Because in one of the appendices there is money set aside for a second car, somewhere in the region of 25,000. So those are my two questions: is how do we actually justify that the fact that 11,000 is a saving and that it wasn't actually wiping its own, e.g. producing more revenue than expenditure, because the issues in my ward are parking on zigzags outside of schools, which is prolific, unfortunately still, and also parking in mandatory cycle lanes, and on no waiting, no restrictions, no unloading at any time locations, which causes a great deal of local community frustration that we don't seem to be enforcing the road traffic laws, nor do we seem to be enforcing for the safety of our children. So that's my question, if you please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Farquhar. What we'll do is during the debate, I'm sure that one of the Cabinet members can address your concerns there. Right, so any other councillors who are not on Cabinet wanted to speak on this issue, on this item? No. I can't see any. So over to Cabinet. Go on then, Councillor Herriott.
I can address Councillor Farquhar's concerns immediately in that case. So the Cameron car is at the end of its life and is not particularly effective due to changes in legislation. Previous governments, only bus clearways in schools zigzags can be enforced by it, and only one school at a time can be enforced against. And we find that the civil enforcement officers are far more effective in general. Obviously, we do have a limit as to how many of those that we have as well, although every school gets a regular visit around the conurbation. The long-term solution is, of course, fixed cameras around zigzags. Some schools do already have the benefit of those, and they experience very little parking on their zigzags because it becomes very notorious quite quickly that you will get a ticket if you stop on those. But obviously that comes at a cost, and they need careful placement. So that's that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Herriott. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just a couple of observations and comments. First of all, I'd like to echo Councillor Cox's thanks and tribute to Adam and his team for what is really quite a remarkable outcome from the budget process that's been going on for months. Some might call it a miracle, but it's certainly a remarkable achievement. And I'd like to pick up on a particular part of that in a second or so. I'd also like to pay tribute to Councillor Cox himself. He has brought a great steadiness and a great authority to the role of Cabinet Member for Finance. He's a very reassuring figure, and he's done a brilliant job. And I think all my Cabinet colleagues would echo that. So thank you, Mike, for leading this process politically. Some of you, well, all of you will probably remember where we were 2 years ago. Just over 2 years ago, in January 2023, when a former leader of the council resigned in what is obviously the opposite of a blaze of glory. I'm not quite sure how you describe that. When he ran out of fiscal headroom, or ran out of road, or was about to drive the council over the cliff. And the remarkable transformation in the council's finances and approach to finances is again nothing short of an amazing piece of work. So again, a little bit of a reminder of that. A reminder, I think I heard this right this morning, but a reminder of the rocky road ahead, or the potentially rocky road ahead, has been outlined in terms of SEND and in terms of other financial problems that loom. I think I heard this morning that the government has already run out of fiscal headroom and may be looking at further public expenditure cuts. So that doesn't sound great for local government, considering that most governments look to local government to do more for less whenever they run into problems. So that's something that is clearly on the horizon. The final thing I wanted to say really was a thank you passed on from other people. You wouldn't expect me to comment on the budget without talking about one of my specific areas, which is culture. So obviously I am absolutely delighted that we have protected the bulk of our cultural arts and culture budget this year, and hopefully going ahead in the MTFP. I don't really want to share this, it's embarrassing, but I failed my maths O-level 4 times. But actually I was delighted when I just asked the Chief Financial Officer to confirm a figure for me about our cultural budget. And it tallied with mine when I was trying to work it out in over a cup of coffee this morning. So our cultural budget is 1/3 of 1% of our net revenue budget of 356 million. It's a tiny proportion of it, but we have protected it in terms of funding for our cultural partners, the Cultural Compact, the Cultural Development Team. And I do want to thank again Mr. Richins for his help, along with Amanda Barry and Helen Wildman and others, and my Cabinet colleagues, that we have in difficult times been able to protect that, because that is something that is really important for us to deliver our aims and ambitions and vision for our communities. And the thanks really comes from 2 organisations. Last week I had 2 meetings, one in Bournemouth and one in Poole with the Arts Council, and I had another meeting in Christchurch with the Heritage Lottery Fund. They wanted me to pass on to Cabinet and to the Council their grateful thanks for our contribution to the cultural agenda. They put millions of pounds into Poole Museum, into our national portfolio organisations, into the Russell Coates, and in many other ways across all our communities. And they are very grateful that we are doing our bit, as small as it might be, given all the other pressures we've got. But they wanted me to basically to pass that on. So I am passing on their thanks and thanking everybody once again for their commitment, our collective commitment to our cultural agenda. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martin. Councillor Burton.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. A couple of points for me. First off, you had apologies from Sharon Caher-Brown, who's the Chair of Children's Overview and Scrutiny. We've had an email just with a few points which she would like me to highlight. And in that they looked at the budget and she would like me to reiterate what they said in the working group, and also to add their encouragement to us, because they're very pleased that we're maintaining our commitment to early help. And the amount of money we spend on early help, which is non-statutory, actually makes better outcome for children and young people and saves us money further down the line, but it is a non-statutory area. I would also like to add my congratulations to the whole team that's done this budget. I think it's a really good budget in a difficult time, and it does demonstrate our commitment to maintaining our work with the vulnerable in our communities. There is one little bit of detail in there that I just want to highlight. In page 82, it does mention the Innovation Fund is mentioned, which it says that the Innovation Fund, this is to do with children's services, obviously, the Innovation Fund will be implemented only to the extent that the funding has been secured. Now, part of that funding is reliant on transfer of funds from one block, school block, to a high needs block. I will talk about this in detail in the paper later on, but a spoiler alert, the decision has been made yesterday. We've got the letter. It doesn't affect the budget, but it's just we know the outcome of that bit of it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Any other portfolio holders looking to speak on this item? Go on then, Councillor Brown.
Just generally to speak on the budget. Just add my thanks to the finance team, because certainly as cabinet members we've had a lot of support from our finance colleagues to help us get to this point. But also I think it's really important that we sort of acknowledge and thank all BCP staff in every part of the organisation, because delivering the current budget and then what we're planning to deliver in the next financial year is not easy. It's staff across every team, will have to face those financial pressures. There's things they'd like to do within their teams, I'm sure, and like to spend money on different things which they won't be able to because of the financial sort of limitations we have. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that this impacts across every team across the entire organisation, to thank them for coping with the financial pressures which we face, in common with, I think, pretty much every local authority in the country. For me, I get a lot of people asking, well, why the council putting in a 4.99% increase? Does that mean that there's going to be improvement in services? And for people asking those questions, I'd really just refer to, it's been commented on before, but paragraphs 4 and 5 in the report for me are key, about the government announcements at the budget about 6.7% increase in national living wage and the increases in employers' national insurance. And as Councillor Cox said, that's around £11.5 million of the council's funding to just cover those issues. So and that is almost all of the council tax increase. So when people ask what are you going to do with this 4.99% extra council tax, I think the answer is we're going to comply with the national living wage laws and pay lots of our care staff and others the national living wage, and we're going to pay the increased national insurance to central government, which they're asking us to pay, and that's mostly it. And everything else is a bit round the edges, really, as far as I'm concerned. So there's lots of other things we can do, bits and pieces, but that's the core of the issue in terms of our council tax increase. For me, budgets are about priorities, and our budgets in 2024 and this budget, they're really helping us to deliver significant stability to the council and deliver on the vision that we've developed for Christchurch, Poole and for Bournemouth. And I think it's really important to reflect that the budget helps us to deliver changes for our residents, and we've delivered on the finance side of things with Councillor Cox and with all of us, a stable, balanced, prudent finances that address all of the issues we addressed in the government's best value notice. In children's services has been noted, the Ofsted to move up to a good rating is a phenomenal result with this financial backdrop. In housing, we've had the recent announcement now that we have no families in bed and breakfast accommodation in terms of housing, and that's a phenomenal achievement. We've managed to allocate over £3 million planned investment in our play areas across the 3 towns. And in my area of health and wellbeing, we haven't had any big sort of announcements like that, but we're still managing to deliver our statutory adult social care services to increasing numbers of local people who have increasing complex and demanding needs. And we're transforming our adult social care system. You'll be aware the council's putting funding into transforming the way we deliver adult social care services. We're increasingly working in partnership with our NHS partners to deliver better health outcomes for residents right across our area. We're establishing our own public health directorate, which we'll be coming on to a bit later in the meeting, which will deliver more focused health services on the front line for our residents. And alongside that, we're maintaining countless services which are really important to our communities, like waste collection, like the culture, priorities like libraries. We're managing to find the finances to continue to deliver those important services. So I think for me, in all the key areas of what the council are doing, we're managing to show tangible deliveries for our local communities, which actually for me is a phenomenal result when us, along with local authorities right across the country, are really struggling to fund these things, that we've been really imaginative and we've worked really hard to actually prioritise those. So I'd just like to highlight those. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I want to talk a little bit about the consultation, because we went out to consultation with the public on our priorities, and it's really interesting because we did it in 2 ways. We took a sample survey where a representative group of the public were asked, and then an open survey where people could write in and tell us the priorities. And the people in the sample survey put social care at the top of the tree, children's social care in particular, and followed by adult social care, as being really significant, important services for us to support. The people in the open survey put collecting rubbish at the top, and maintaining roads as second, with 2 social care priorities third. That's really quite interesting in terms of the difference between the people who come to us, who feel it's important to tell us what's on, and if we go out to the wider public. And I wanted to mention the capital programme, because there's quite a lot of work that we're doing within our capital programme across our areas, particularly in my area, things like flooding and coastal risk erosion. In others around the seafront development, culture has already been mentioned, and some important investment there. but there's about £7 million on structural maintenance of our highways within that capital programme, which is an important strand, and it's actually 2/3 of the standard money that we get through the local transport plan. It goes on just trying to maintain our highways. It's a never-ending task, and whenever people complain about a pothole, I have to say, did you report it? Because if you don't tell us about it, we don't know about it, and that's a really significant thing. But we do what we can to maintain it. That's maintaining bridges and all sorts of things. It's not just potholes, but it's an important strand of our overall budget. And I think as others have done, I will echo congratulations and thanks to Adam, but also the staff across the whole organisation in terms of trying their best to tighten the strings yet further to make this all balance and support us in doing what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Any other Cabinet members wishing to speak? I was just going to add briefly to this, thanks to the scrutiny committees as well, because we did something a little bit different this time round with budget setting, where each of the scrutiny committees and the board chose areas that they would like to scrutinise in a little bit more depth. And obviously after we had put scrutiny back in where it should be, which is able to actually look ahead at some of these issues as they're coming down the road, we were able to get them to consider various areas which were important to them, and I think that collaborative approach to budget setting is really important. So I wanted to thank them for their time looking at those areas, and looking forward to that next time as well. Finally, we do have a 15%. Sorry, we do have a rise in council tax within this budget, but I have been reflecting on some of the difficult decisions that we had to make last time round, and the thing that sticks with me is that when we were setting out our principles for decision making and budget setting, we considered two things. One was to get the basics right, and the other was to protect services for the most vulnerable people in our communities. And I'm really pleased that this budget really does just that. And it's not just the budget, but we're also seeing those shoots throughout the council with some of the things that Councillor Brown has just mentioned there, like a good rating in our children's services, and being able to put investment into play parks and things like that. So I think this is a budget that we can be really confident is going to continue with those principles, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing the council debate on it next week. So I'm just going to go back to Councillor Cox to sum up on this item, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, colleagues, for the comments that you've made. That's great, and I just wanted to emphasise again that I think what this budget is about is getting the fundamentals right, and that's, if we get the fundamentals right, then everything improves across the board, and it proved to be a useful reminder that it wasn't just the items I'd said that I'd commented on, the children's services and the B&B accommodation, where we've made real improvements. There's improvements across the board. And Councillor Brown certainly has reminded me that of the great work that's going on in adult social care to make improvements across the board, and Councillor Hadley as well with the coastal erosion. I think there's really good work going on, and the council's officers need to be thanked for that. So therefore, with that, I'd just like to recommend this budget to the Cabinet and then Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cox. So I'm going to take this to a vote now. It is a recommendation to Council and a part decision for us as well. Can I see all those who are in favour, please? Thank you. That's unanimous. Right, so we're moving on to agenda item 8, which is the housing revenue account budget setting.
Budget monitoring, yes, item 7.
Oh gosh, oh dear, I have actually skipped over an item there. Apologies, Councillor Wilson. So agenda item 7, which is budget monitoring for 24-25 at Q3. So this item is going to be presented by Councillor Cox. However, I'm going to be proposing it. Is there someone to second?
Yes, Leader, I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Right, over to you, Councillor Cox, to present the report.
Thank you again, Leader, for that. What I'd just like to say is it's worth remembering that in 24-25 budget we set a year ago in February 24, we agreed net revenue of 359 million, which included 38 million pounds of savings, the largest ever recorded savings programme in BCP's history. A programme needed really to stop the drain on reserves, which had been the cornerstone of previous budgets for the previous 3 years. We knew that it would be difficult to achieve, and the combination of wet weather and increasing demands on social care and homelessness budgets have made it really doubly hard. We did set aside £8 million of contingencies to cope with the uncertainties about trying to achieve £38 million. And at the end of Q2, we had used up all of these contingencies, and we're still recording an adverse pressure of £3 million. You can see from table 1 that £4.6 million of savings have still not been achieved, but that represents 12% of the total. So we have actually achieved 88% of the savings programme so far, and efforts to achieve the remainder and or replacement savings are continuing in both children's and wellbeing. However, the overall pressures in children's services are very large and represent a significant proportion of the overall variance that we have in Q3. As we've discussed endlessly, it feels like the level of the DSG grant remains an existential threat to this council and many other councils up and down the country. At the end of March 25, we're forecasting that the negative reserves will be £108 million on the DSG, which will dwarf our general reserves, both ring-fenced and unring-fenced. As a result, we will run out of cash to keep paying the bills, but we have been working very hard, as I've previously talked about, to make sure that we will have the cash available to keep the service going. In terms of the capital programme, the capital budget has been updated to account for the 23-24 slippages of £62 million, and there's £87 million reduction in for reprofiling schemes into 25-26, and as well as the removal of some that were no longer valid economically. In terms of the housing revenue account, there is a net favourable variance of about 2.9 million, which, after accounting for higher depreciation charges as a result of standardising depreciation rates across BCP and some lower interest charges, which has now resulted in an overall positive variance of £1.5 million variance. So that's the presentation of the Q3 monitoring.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cox. Are there any councillors in the room online not on Cabinet who wish to speak on this item? Not seeing any indications, so over to Cabinet. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment a little on this. I attended the Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting Monday evening, and there was a bit of debate around this and the budget. And there was one point which I sort of wanted to speak and correct, really, that the Leader of the Opposition made a bit of a critical comment about the fact that we're overspent across all of our directorates, and why is that? And have we not sort of set our budgets right, etc., etc. And what I wanted to clarify was the understanding of what these numbers actually show. We're not overspent in those areas. We are projecting that these are the financial figures as at the end of December, at the end of the third quarter. We're projecting that we could be overspent by the end of the fourth quarter if we don't take sort of remedial action. And the benefit of this, and I think it's sort of testament to our finance systems and the great information data we have, that here we are only a few weeks after the the end of December, and we've got a lot of detailed data about where we are against all of our different budgets, and all of our teams are sort of monitoring that and working on that. And the fact that we've got this really good information helps us, all of our teams, to really focus on those areas that are important in terms of delivering against this year's budget. And I certainly know within adult social care, you know, that there's a lot of work ongoing in all of these areas to make sure that we sort of control spending where possible, and that we maximise income and collections. So I'm confident, particularly in my area, that, you know, this will change before the end of the year, that actually in a positive way. I'm really hopeful that we will do. So I think the comment that we were overspent in all areas is not correct, that we're forecasting we will be if we didn't take action, but obviously teams will be taking action over the coming couple of months before the end of the financial year to aim to deliver on budget. So I just wanted to make that comment, really.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Any other Cabinet members wishing to speak? Councillor Herritt.
Within this, I'd just like to take time to acknowledge the various teams that sit in my portfolio, especially seafront and parking. As Councillor Cox acknowledged, we had some incredibly wet weather through the summer, widely recognised as being the worst since 2018. And obviously against that increasingly difficult backdrop, it causes less people to come to the beach, park, buy ice creams and coffees. Not only that, but that also makes kind of cliff slips increasingly likely, and every time we have one, it gets harder and harder to deal with, and those teams work incredibly hard to kind of make sure we get as much business as usual going through, as well as retaining kind of, or making up that gap that is coming down.
Thank you, Councillor Herritt. Any other Cabinet members wishing to speak on this? Okay, so Councillor Cox, anything to add?
No, thank you, Leader. I just wanted to recommend that Cabinet note the budget monitoring and agree the acceptance of the capital grants for the General Fund and also the HRA. Thank you.
Thank you. So can I take a vote on this one? All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Okay, so we move on to agenda item 8, which is the housing revenue account budget setting. This report is going to be proposed by Councillor Wilson. Can I see if there is someone willing to second that one?
I'd like to second, please, Eden.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. And it's actually going to be presented by Councillor Cox because it sits under his portfolio. So over to you, Councillor Cox.
Thank you again, Leader. Really, the housing revenue account, the HRA, is a separate account within the council's budgets that really ring fences the income and expenditure associated with council housing. This budget sets out the proposals regarding increases in rents, service charges, and other charges to tenants and leaseholders. The report sets out plans for expenditure on services to residents, repairs and improvements to homes, and the provision of new homes, taking into account the new legal and regulatory requirements. The report also demonstrates how the HRA supports the council's corporate strategy and objectives. So it's without further ado, I really want to recommend that Cabinet recommends and that Council agrees next week that the revenue budget is, sets out the following principles. I think it's 1, 2, 6, and also that the income and expenditure budget as set out in Appendix 3 is agreed, and that the capital budgets for 25-26 are set out with the principles set out in 1 to 3. So I'd recommend that Council. I also recommend that Council agrees, the Cabinet agrees, that further details of the medium and long-term budget implications are presented to Cabinet during 25-26, following the remodelling of the 30-year HRA business plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cox. Right. Are there any councillors in the room or online who would like to speak on this item? Who aren't on Cabinet? Nope, so I'm going to go over to Cabinets. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Leader. The housing revenue account is often perceived as a less glamorous budget, I would say, than the main one, but I don't think it's any less important for our tenants that occupy our over 10,000 council homes. Yeah, Councillor Cox took a lot of what I was probably going to say, but I think there's a lot of stuff in here that he didn't mention, so I'd just like to pick up on it. In terms of, he briefly did touch upon our regulatory and quality requirements coming forward, but in terms of those, we have a number of topics on the horizon facing us immediately in the short term and in the longer term. New building and fire safety regulations following on from Grenfell, much needed and improved consumer regulation and complaint handling across the sector, the decarbonisation of our stock, which will cost an astronomical figure to do well, and we will need a substantial government investment to do it well. Decent home standards, damp and mould, inflation across the board, including costs and services, as well as the national rent setting policy, which is really, really key. It will determine how much income we can generate in order to meet the challenges I've just mentioned. And you can find our response to the government's consultation on this at Appendix 7. But the headline to that policy is that we welcome a suggested longer 5-year period in the settlement. 10 years would give us more stability, and that CPI plus 1% increases per year in rents alone will not allow us to meet the challenges that we face. The income from over 10,000 homes, rented and leasehold properties, we generate is in the region of 54 million. With service charges and a few other things, our total income of amounts to 58 million. This report is all about how we spend that the best way possible. So it's important that the 54 million that we spend on services, management and maintenance, both planned and emergency, is spent effectively and in line with what our tenants need and expect. And I believe that this is what this budget does. Within this budget, we maintain a level of reserves above a 5% minimum, which will be forecast for 6.4 million by March this year and 8.6 million by March of next year. The budget already allows for additional staff costs for complaint handling, better managing of antisocial behaviour, and improving resident involvement in all key areas within the new consumer standard. But more importantly, they're all key standards our residents want to see investment in. And these standards that we just don't want to just meet, but we want to surpass. It's also clear that we'll need additional staff if we want to provide assurance in areas such as property compliance, performance, and more general aspects of business and commercial running of the HRA. Proposals are being developed currently to support this. It's not known exactly what the cost will be yet. However, we have increased the budget by over £600,000 to ensure that any requirements for additional staff can be funded. Something that we've not done before is that we've put aside £100,000 towards community projects for our tenants, and we'll be working with them on how they want to see that spent. An additional £1 million has been made available through capital expenditure for planned maintenance to help move towards EPC-C across our stock, which we previously had no budget for. In terms of major capital works expenditure, we are forecast for a £43 million spend in 25-26. Details are set out within the capital expenditure, it's Appendix 4. However, this programme includes a sizable £26 million on new capital housing schemes that have already been approved or that are progressing through the approval process, for example, Hawkwood Road. Constitutional Hill and Oakdale schemes show approved budgets so far. Further business cases will be presented in due course for these schemes. There are further projects under consideration, which will be brought with a full business case when the remodelled HRI business plan can demonstrate affordability. It's a bit of a transitional budget as we develop our 30-year business plan, and I'm excited to bring forward the 30-year business plan within the next financial year that will show the intentions of the HRA in the longer term. But I think this is a really strong budget that looks to address some really important issues for our residents. I'd like to thank the head of BCP Homes, who is here, as well as the Director of Housing and Communities, both of whom are a joy to work with and who, like myself, are passionate about achieving the best outcomes for our tenants. And along with their team, have put a lot of work into this. So yeah, happy to second this paper with the recommendations I'll set out.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Any Cabinet members wishing to speak on this? Councillor Hadley?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I think the Councillor Wilson made several references to the carbon footprint of the homes, and I think it's really welcome the investment in trying to improve the energy efficiency, particularly because we are dealing with people who often are most economically disadvantaged in our community, and fuel costs are rising, and so the more we can do to better insulate the homes, the better for them financially. I'm also really welcome the investment in the Oakdale Adult Education Centre site and the work that the team have been doing to incorporate community facilities within that, which is really important to the community in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Moore?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Could I just add my thanks to the team involved in preparing this HRA, but also everyone involved in housing communities and BCP homes who have clearly had to work very hard to successfully address the levels of rising need in our communities this year. It really should be noticed what they've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Any other Cabinet members wishing to speak on this item? Nope. Can I just check whether Councillor Cox or Councillor Wilson wants to add anything to sum up? Nope.
No, it's all fine with me.
Thank you. So I think we will take this to a vote. Can I see all those in favour, please? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Okay, so agenda item 9 is the review of the approach to waste enforcement and waste offences enforcement policy. Councillor Wilson is going to be proposing this report and presenting it. Can I see if there is someone to second? Thank you very much, Councillor Hannah. Councillor Wilson? Yeah.
Thank you, Leader. This paper comes following a 6-month review of our increase in charges, consideration of a number of reports of waste offences, public opinion on our new fine levels, and compliance with legislation. And so we have decided to update our policy to address fly tipping, as well as other waste offences such as fly posting, littering, etc. With this policy, we are really trying to strike the right balance when it comes to issuing fines. Under our proposed plans, fines for fly tipping will be tiered depending on the level of impact caused by those leaving items on roads and pavements. The proposed changes reflect the importance to deter fly tipping, but also recognise the strength of feeling from local communities who have challenged the current approach, particularly around the concerns of a £1,000 blanket fine that is currently applied under the existing policy. We are, and I'm always quick to emphasise this to anyone I meet who doesn't live here, so very fortunate to live in an area boasting such natural beauty. It is easily, in my opinion, our 3 towns' greatest asset, and for this reason, it's crucial that we protect it by addressing issues like fly tipping. We know how important this is to our residents who want to live and work in clean and clutter-free conurbation, and we know this because we are residents ourselves, and it's important to us. Feedback from residents has supported the formation of this proposed policy, which aims to strike a balance between not overly penalising honest people who might make a mistake, whilst reprimanding anyone who consciously shows our area no consideration. Whilst this new policy differentiates in level of fines, it's really important to be clear any obstruction to the public highway is unacceptable, especially when it prevents access for those with mobility challenges or parents with prams. This policy aims to serve everyone. I would also like to be clear that items left out for free or collection on public land, such as the pavement, are considered as fly tipping, and I encourage residents to only display goods on their own private land, otherwise you will be at risk of a fine. And we will be doing a really strong communications campaign so that residents both understand the level of fines and what constitutes an offence. I would finally like to really emphasise my gratitude to the Head of Public Protection, who has honestly worked so hard in finessing this policy to get it where it is. And so I'm really happy to put this paper forward as we look to strike the right balance in tackling fly tipping and other waste offences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Can I ask if there are any councillors outside of Cabinet who would like to speak? Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you so much, Chair. Twice in one day. That's a shocker. Yes, fly tipping. It's an ongoing issue, and it is meat and drink for every ward councillor. So I do welcome for the public opinion this approach. So it's dealt with a case by case basis. Obviously, there is a perception that easy money is to be made by targeting individuals that are leaving goods for reclaim or reuse out and about. Likewise, there's a perception that people that are fly tipping for one of my favourite, or littering for one of my pet hates for disposal cigarette butts should be hit. But my question relates to the resource of those individuals for our partner in WISE as regards the service levels and the agreements. Some issues which I've encountered as a ward councillor, as others in this room may well have done, is that when reporting fly tipping, where there is possibly evidence of that can be used to identify the individual, such as bin bags with, I don't know, envelopes, etc., in their bills, there has been a perceived and a noticeable drop-off in the response time of those third-party contractors in actually attending. That causes a delay in the clearance teams because, to my understanding, is that the clearance team can't come in and dispose of the fly tipping until such time as the third-party contractor has said we've investigated as part of their WISE mnemonic. So I appreciate that this paper is regarding the assessment of the fines, but is there some sort of guarantee that there is a service level agreement as regards the capability of the third party to actually get out there on the ground, investigate, so the clearance teams can get in and clear the fly tipping that's been reported? I know it's a necessary part of the exercise, but there is fly tipping that is delayed while waiting for investigation. That's in my own ward, and I can share cases with you. So that's my question. Are we happy that the third-party contractor is fulfilling their part of the bargain, in that a resident can report fly tipping, the process can happen swiftly for the investigation, and there's no evidence which will lead to a conviction, then that's fine. The clearance teams have given the thumbs up to move in swiftly to clear the fly tipping. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Farquhar, and Councillor Wilson will address that when he sums up. Can I see if there are any other councillors who aren't on Cabinet wishing to speak? Can't see any indications. So over to Cabinet. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Leader. I am going to address very much the report itself. I hear Councillor Farquhar's concerns. And as you said, Councillor Wilson will be able to respond to those. But the report was very much reviewing the situation for other types of fly tipping, in particular those causing obstruction or unsightly situations immediately outside people's residences. And I've got to say I very much welcome the report. I welcome the conclusions that it is reaching and the recommendation that it makes. And I want to express appreciation to Councillor Wilson as a portfolio holder and to the officers who have worked on it for the fact that we have got it together and that the recommendations are as they are. As has been mentioned, there were a few situations last year where residents were expressing concerns about things. What we have shown is that we're ready to listen to residents' concerns. We're ready to review what takes place and ready to make changes as appropriate. So I think that is something good to be said about the way in which the council has operated on this. I totally share Councillor Wilson's concerns to keep the area looking as good as it can be, and in particular in this context, to keep pavements free of obstruction. Whilst I welcome in one sense the two-tier fine situation for items that are left on the pavement, I would endorse Councillor Wilson's call for no items to be left on the pavement at all. there is no need for it. I fully support the idea of reusing items that are reusable, but there are other ways in which that can be done. There are websites in which they can be advertised. There is the possibility of leaving in their own premises, on their front garden or on a drive. I'm not going to encourage that because I actually think that looks unsightly in the environment as well. But it is lawful, it is allowed, and it doesn't block pavements. I would also add, if I'm allowed to advertise what in fact is a charity rather than a business as such, there is an organisation, Dorset Reclaim, which will come and take away unwanted items free of charge to householders, which has a base in Boscombe with a warehouse and a showroom, and which enables those items to be sold to members of the public who would like to use them for what are very reasonable prices, simply to cover their costs. It is a charitable organisation. So there are other ways in which residents can ensure that items that are reusable are indeed reused. I would encourage those to be used. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hannah. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Well, I do think there's some very interesting information in this report, because residents who mention street cleaning, which they often do on social media, do need to know that the council's annual budget for street cleaning is 3.7 million. That is pretty significant number. Also, that between April and November last year, there were 2,474 complaints of fly tipping reported. So that's where the problem arises, obviously. But I think I would just like to mention about jumble trails, because as a fundraising event, these are growing in popularity with our residents. And I know that we're hoping to hold one shortly in my ward. As I understand it, these trails are like a car boot sale, but sellers set up a table of things they want to sell outside their own homes. And yeah, I do think this is a good way to recycle, but clearly there's a need to remind residents who want to sell their unwanted items to be really careful and make sure they set up their table within the boundaries of their own property or driveway. Probably isn't too much of a problem in my ward because everybody has frontages and everything else, and usually driveways. But obviously in some wards it's going to be more difficult. But apart from that, I'm really happy to support this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. I just, in response to the plug for Dorset Reclaim, which is an excellent charity, there are many other charities, British Heart Foundation, obviously take furniture as well, and there's also, if things are taken to our recycling centres, then the team will try and, if appropriate, we'll push that through to you, and that includes giving that furniture to people in particular need. So there is a route directly through to people, young people setting up home without any funds, social care supported. I just wanted to mention the in terms of the relationship we have around enforcement on fly tipping. Our environment team obviously sits within my brief, and they do make an assessment of whether there's something that clearly isn't likely to have any evidence in it, and just get on and clear it. So that they do attempt to clear stuff off the street, which is clearly not going to have anything that identifies it. It is a real challenge. And I saw online just the other day a country lane. I'm not actually sure whether it was in BCP area or in rural Dorset nearby, which was absolutely strewn with insulation material. Bags and bags and bags of it, and it's just completely unsightly. And that's one of their challenges. This is a whole spectrum through from wholesale industrial tipping by people who are breaking their license, and if the Environment Agency caught them, there would be a really significant fine to be paid. And that's down to householders making sure that when you do use these sorts of operatives, that they do have a license, and that they are disposing of the waste responsibly. You're paying them, but you are responsible for the waste that they tip. So if it's found, it will come back to you. And I think that's a really key element of this at one end. At the other end, I think if households can find an alternative use for rubbish rather than sticking it in the bin or the recycling centres, then that's of benefit to them and to the area and to the planet. So I recommend that if you can possibly do it with stuff still have a useful life on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Burton.
I feel that we all need to say something about our favourite charities now. I would say that Julia's House, of course, also takes quite a lot of items for resale. But one plea I would make, because I do know I also have a friend who's a chair of an animal charity and has charity shops. Please, when you do take things, make sure it is stuff which you know in your heart that can be resold. There is a big issue with charities receiving often in the middle of the night bags of unwanted things which they end up having to pay to dispose of, when actually we know that charities rely very much on this sort of thing and do a lot of good work with it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Any other councillors wishing to speak? I'm not seeing any indications, so back to you, Councillor Wilson, to sum up.
Thank you, Leader. I think I'm going to bring in Sophie Sajic, the Head of Public Protection, just to really be clear on George's points, because I think one of the most important things around this topic is clarity and is the communication. So I know Sophie will be able to kind of address his points in a more succinct way than I would be able to.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson, and thanks, Councillor Farquhar. Not sure I'll be succinct, but I'll try. I completely agree. There is a contract management in place when it comes to our current contractor. That is managed quite robustly through regular contract management meetings. But as Councillor Moore has identified, we have got a significant amount of fly tipping reports in the area. 2,400 in a year is quite substantial. So it's about making sure that we're responding to those in a timely manner, but the focus also being on deterrence. So that's why striking a right balance of the right level of enforcement, but a really robust comms campaign around waste education is really important. We need people to know what is fly tipping, what are waste offences, and also how they can correctly dispose of their waste. So that's a key part of our future policy and how we move forward. We've also got some developing benefits at the moment around in-cab technology, again around identifying what is likely to have evidence and what isn't, and removing that and clearing that as quickly as possible where there isn't a reasonable expectation around prosecution. And the last thing I would note is around the partnership working that we do. So we work very closely with people like the Environment Agency and around our colleagues in environment to make sure that we are best identifying where these offences are taking place and gathering the evidence where we can in all possibilities. So we have got a really robust process. We have got robust contract management in place, and the focus now is making sure that we are deterring fly tipping as best as we possibly can.
Yeah, just thank you, Sophie, for that. That's really clear. And just, I suppose, to add, thank you to Cabinet colleagues for your support in this. I think, obviously, it's been quite the journey to get this policy through, but I think it's a really positive one. Hopefully, we'll give, alongside our robust comms campaign that Sophie mentioned, will give residents clarity and will kind of really give a fair way of tackling this issue. So, yeah, hopefully, we'll all vote it through now.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So can I take this to a vote, please? All those in favour? Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you. Right, next item is agenda item 10, which is phase 2 of the Council Sustainable Fleet Management Strategy and the Fleet Replacement Programme. This is going to be presented by Councillor Hadley, but is there someone to second it, please? Thank you very much, Councillor Herritt. Over to you, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. This is a paper in two parts, really. We have about 600 vehicles in the fleet operated by BCP Council across a range of things, from large trucks doing the refuse services through to cars and vans, our fleet management team work quite hard to try and establish what is the best, most sustainable route going forwards, and obviously with our commitments to 2030 carbon reduction, to moving away from diesel and petrol vehicles where we can. We do have some constraints on that, particularly physical restraints on our depot capacity. Both in terms of physical space, but also electrical supply, and that is constraining our ability to move away from diesel vehicles. But the investment that we've been making over the last 3 years has started us on that journey, and the investment you're being asked to support today accelerates that for us. So there are proposed to be 102 electric vehicles in the next phase of this work. We do also have some vehicles that are effectively stored at home that members of staff who are either work entirely on the road and therefore don't need to go into an office, but to start their day have those vehicles at home, and there is some work going on around how we can transition those, because clearly we're then reliant on electrical supply in other locations. The vehicle lifespan in terms of capital it's considered 8 years. We are actually, based on experience, working to a 10-11-year life for many of these vehicles, and clearly they will operate until they are felt to be not economic. And again, Mark and the team in Fleet work really hard to try and get the best we can out of those. Just to the point that Councillor Farquhar raised much earlier in terms of the camera car. The appendix at the back lists all of the current vehicles that are heading towards the end of their life, and that includes the camera car. The issue is that the capacity of the team to be able to go out and do the work without necessarily having a camera on the roof, there may still need to be a new car. So that's the sort of the existing fleet and the worst case of what we will need to spend to replace like for like. I think based on the answer you had from Councillor Herrett earlier, it's unlikely we'd put a camera on the top of the roof, but we might still need to have a vehicle for them to get around the area in. I think that's probably enough from me, except for we have been doing some careful work around the lifetime costs of the vehicles, and established that for the smaller and medium-sized vehicles, it is actually more economic to have an electric vehicle. As I said, there are some challenges around recharging of them, and that's work that we're going through at the moment. But in terms of there's reduced maintenance costs on an electric vehicle versus an internal combustion engine one, and reduced lifetime costs, although the capital investment is often bigger. So we are taking that sort of in the round and trying to work on the overall budget for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. I'm going to see if there are any councillors in the room or online who aren't on Cabinet who wish to speak on this item. Can't see any indications. So over to Cabinet. Councillor Herrett.
It's a good job. I've not got much to add to what Councillor Hadley had to cover. And just that it's really good to see further electric, and that services are kind of embracing some changes where they can in terms of flexibility and capacity. The Seafront team, for example, have some kind of light pedalled vehicles for restocking along the seafront to reduce kind of the size and scale of vehicles, as well as the carbon input. There are some challenges on sand in terms of weight and capacity for some of the vehicles, which mean that some of them have to remain those larger 4x4s, but there is effort going there. And the other real point that I had was actually responding to Councillor Farquhar, because I realised I hadn't answered that question earlier, and that's exactly what it was, is that the car is still needed to move kind of the enforcement officers around the conurbation, even though it's not going to have unlikely to have a camera on top of it.
Thank you, Councillor Herrett. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? I don't think so. I can't see any indications. So, anything to add, Councillor Hadley?
Just that the Parks Department are also looking at trialling something with cargo boats, but they have obviously, as their workload has changed and the way in which they operate, they do have to carry out quite a lot of stuff. So it is about trying to find the most appropriate vehicle for the tasks that team is likely to undertake.
Okay, so we'll move to a vote on this one. Can I see all those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you. That's unanimous. So we move on to agenda item 11, which is early years and mainstream schools funding 25-26. Councillor Burton is going to be proposing and presenting the report. Is there someone to second?
I'll second, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martin. Councillor Burton.
Thank you very much, Leader. Just before I start, there's two recommendations with this, because both of these are going to council. Recommendation D, it says it depends on the DFE decisions. Now, we do know, as I said earlier, that decision has been made. Therefore, it sort of slightly simplifies the paper. The recommendation still stands because both whether the decision, which way it went, is covered in the paper. But I just thought I'd highlight. Now, this report is a very regulated area, and in the past, I think the portfolio holder would probably not have said a lot about this, but because of all the issues with a high needs block and SEND deficit, and last year there was quite a lot of misunderstanding around this. I thought I'd just spend a little bit longer, if you don't mind, going through it just to make sure things are clear. So the dedicated school grant, known as, it's called the DSG through the paper, is money that is spent by government on education. It's paid via the local authority, and most of the money simply passes to our account, and it's broken down into 4 separate funding blocks. The early years schools high needs block, that's where the SEND provision is, and the central school services, that's the smallest area. The total estimate, and I know when Councillor Moore mentioned the amount that's spent on street cleaning earlier on, I thought, 405 million is the amount of budget we're talking about here. And it's mainly based on pupil numbers. I would add that there's a falling birth rate at the moment, so there's less school-age children, about minus 1.9% in primary, secondary up slightly at 0.7 because there's slight bulge of the number of children going through, and this is a national trend, so it's not just BCP that we've got a falling birth rate. In the paper, the formula options include transferring a 1% school block funding for the new high needs expenditure on service to help mainstream schools provide more support for SEND pupils. The idea was to spend the 2.8 million on the innovation fund and to help mainstream schools provide more suitable support for pupils with SEND. To make it clear and stop all the misunderstandings that happened last year, this transfer was designed to be spent within schools on pupils, not to be used to fund deficit in the council's budget shortfall. In the paper, it also explains that that to fill this expenditure would require a transfer from mainstream funding of 21%. So to actually to do that, you will have to take 21% of schools. Now, this figure there's an illustration to the size of the deficit, and it isn't any suggestion, as some people seem to think last year. It would be ludicrous to talk about taking that amount of money off schools in so many ways. It's just there to illustrate the size. The cumulative deficit at the end of March 2019 is predicted to be about 385 million. You'll be noticing that I've been using the past tense on talking about the transfer. This is because the transfer to happen, we need agreement from the Secretary of State, and we received that decision yesterday, and they say no. That both simplifies and complicates the decision. I would mention that the letter that we got, there are some technical errors in the letter that we received, and we're asking for those to be corrected. There seems to be a misunderstanding of the Secretary of State, especially around the joint use agreement, which has been part of the local mainstream formula for over 20 years, amongst other things. This doesn't directly impact this paper, but I just sort of mention it. That's why the letter isn't out as yet. Last year, the school forum did not agree a 0.5% school block funding could be transferred to the high needs, only the surplus funding of 0.1%, but successful application to the DFE was made for the 0.5 based on the DSG deficit management plan submitted. So last year we did get the transfer. This year we left with a transfer, the surplus of the schools, which the schools forum did agree, of a 0.4%. Which is 1.1 million. It was 0.1% last year. There are details in the report about the plans for the use of the 2.8 million for the Innovation Fund, a fund that the Schools Forum agreed with, I believe it's unanimously. However, that option now needs rethinking about. The Innovation Fund would have helped paid for a team of inclusion advisors sourced from experienced school practitioners such as Senkos to support and advise schools as part of the graduated approach to inclusion. A training and development programme for schools focused to identify needs, for example, in supporting children with social, emotional and mental health needs. Additional special schools alternative provision outreach to build the skills and capacity for mainstream schools to meet need. And funding allocated to mainstream schools to be able to submit expressions of interest, so how they can use to support cohorts of children within their settings in new ways where without this funding they would otherwise have struggled to meet their needs in mainstream. So that's what the money was intended to be spent on. I'll come back to what I said in the budget paper. The Innovation Fund will be implemented only to the extent that funding has been secured. So there's now some doubt on that, but I'm afraid it's slightly early because it's only yesterday to the work done to see where we're going to move forward from this. So I think that really sums up where we're at, and hopefully we still have support for this paper. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton, for explaining that rather complex issue, but very clearly. Thank you. So, are there any councillors who are not on Cabinet wishing to speak? Can't see any indications. Any on Cabinet wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I just wanted to comment because I previously sat on Schools Forum a few years ago and been involved in these sort of conversations and the complex sort of financial arrangements for this. But for me, to make it quite simple, in paragraph 2 of the report in table 1 there about looks at the school funding settlement for the coming year, and we talk a lot about SEND funding and the fact it's going to cost 120 million odd this year in BCP, but we're only funded 60 million. So, and we discussed that earlier with the budget. But for me, that table highlights the sort of national political priorities, which shifted quite a bit. I think last year that national government extended the entitlement to early years and the number of hours that parents could get their sort of early years childcare through providers. And when you look at that and you see that government have agreed a 46% increase in the early years funding block from 36.5 million to 53.5 million in 1 year. And then you look at the high needs bit and there's a 6% increase of only 3.5 million. That for me highlights the national political priorities. If they had wanted to really prioritise SEND provision and really seriously fund it, then I think it was under the previous government. If you'd switched that around the other way and had a 6% increase in early years and 46% increase in SEND, then that would have gone an awful long way to covering the deficits and delivering the adequate SEND services that we need. I'm not saying early years shouldn't be improved, but I think when you look at the significant increases in those numbers, for me that highlights how we're just hamstrung by whatever the national political priorities are. And I hope that the new government are going to prioritise high needs to that extent and actually start to really seriously increase the funding and adequately funding our high needs provision.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other councillors wanting to speak on this item? Councillor Burton, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, just to sum up, that I know I spoke mainly about the finances involved in this. Of course, I would say that the priorities, as always, are making sure that we get a better SEND service for our children and young people, because that's what our focus always is. I did say this is a highly regulated area, and the high amount of regulation is one of the complexities that makes that more difficult to achieve. So I won't add any more because I think I spoke enough about it.
Thank you. Right, we will take this one to a vote. So all those in favour of the recommendations to council? Thank you, that's unanimous. So we move on to agenda item 12, which is the school admission arrangements for 26-27. Councillor Burton is going to be proposing and presenting this one. Is there someone to second?
I'd like to second, please, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moore. Councillor Burton.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I shall be quicker on this one. So this will be hopefully a lot simpler, quicker. This also, the children's over in scrutiny have had sight of this. It's full information, and within the email we got from Councillor Carr-Brown, they said that they have no other comments to add to it. So BCP Council administers admission arrangements for its community and voluntary controlled schools. There's a legal requirement to determine the arrangements annually. There are no changes to the arrangements of this year compared with last year. So the local authority must also draw up and publish a scheme to coordinate the admissions arrangements for all publicly funded schools within the area for 2026-27. Children with an education, health and care plan issued by local authority naming schools where children will be admitted to the school, therefore have the first preference to that school. The list of criteria is on page 460, I'll say it again, 436, I'm getting my numbers the wrong way around. I would just like to say a thing about the in-year fair access, because that is where schools get together and look at placing children and young people who are out of education for one reason or another. That is a system which I know is very useful to help make sure that our children and young people are in schools. I'm not going to say any more, because I say it is basically the same as last year, and hopefully we can agree it.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Any councillors wishing to speak on this who aren't on Cabinet? Nope. Over to Cabinet. Oh, I'm also not seeing any indications on this one. Right, we will take this one straight to a vote. Can I see all those in favour, please? Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 13, which is public health disaggregation, progress and overview of decisions. Councillor Brown will propose and present the report. Is there someone to second this one?
I'd like to second again, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, hopefully members have had a chance to sort of read through the details of the report, which is aiming to really do two things: just to update on the progress that's been made since last April, when we made the decision to disaggregate our public health services, which are currently run pan-Dorset for the whole sort of Dorset Council area and BCP Council area. And obviously members are aware that we've sort of notified Dorset Council that we're aiming to disaggregate by the 1st of April of this year, so that we'll have our own BCP public health and communities directorate. I just wanted to really, actually the second part of that is there's a few specific decisions detailed in Appendix 1 which need to be made by Cabinet as well, which I'll mention in a moment. But I just really wanted to highlight the importance of public health services for our communities. That I suppose public health across the country really came to prominence during the pandemic, and people suddenly realised there's these departments of health professionals that are actually there to protect us from things like pandemics, but actually sort of working day in, day out on health protection and to improve our lives. But Public Health Dorset delivers and commissions a whole wide range of services for our residents, right from school nursing services, including health screening and assessments for our youngest residents, to the Live Well Dorset service, which can help all of us to live healthier, happier lives. Commissions mental health support, drug and alcohol treatment services for those who are experiencing problems in those areas. There's stop smoking support, there's sexual health services, and NHS health checks, and a lot more besides. And most of us don't realise that behind the scenes there are just teams of health professionals who are working to help us all to live longer, healthier lives. And actually they're saving, improving lives within the BCP area week in, week out from the work that they do. I sat on the Integrated Care Partnership board meeting a couple of weeks ago, and there was discussion about NHS health screening, and I sat there and realised that, probably like others here, I'd received a text message from my GP recently asking me to pop in and do a blood pressure check and click on a link and fill in a health survey. And I thought, oh, well, you know, I haven't been in for a long time. The GP's just decided they'll send me a message and do that. And then you sit in these sort of discussions and you realise that actually there's a lot of national academic research that goes into this to identify particular communities and people who don't engage with services of particular ages. And actually there's particular health issues like stroke and heart disease, which can be linked to blood pressure. So, and it all filters down, and Public Health Dorset look at that research, and our public health experts work with our GP networks right across the area about health screening, and they say you need to be communicating to these particular groups within your practice, because you know it's important that we understand what their weight is and get the blood pressure, because if there's an issue there, that can be an increased chance of heart disease or stroke. And so if we want to prevent that and improve people's lives and health, then we need to sort of start off by screening these things. And I sat there and I just thought, well, I thought I just got a text from the GP because I'd been in for a long time, but actually it's all these experts and all this academic research that filters down, and just I get a ping on my phone telling me I need to do a blood pressure check, thinking nothing much more of it. And I think that just indicates how there are experts behind the scenes who are really thinking about all of our health and how important it is to make sure that we improve our health. So in the report, it does highlight there and list in detail the disaggregation, the work that's taken place. I do want to acknowledge the impact and uncertainty for our public health teams. Probably a lot of us have been in work situations where structures are changing, and you know you're not sure what your job role will be. And I think it's important to understand that they've managed to keep delivering the public health services despite that uncertainty. And I hope that's coming to an end soon, that actually people start to be clear about whether they'll be working within the Dorset Council area or the BCP Council area. And also in the report it notes the appointment of a new BCP Director of Public Health and Communities, who will be starting with us on the 1st of April, and Dorset Council have equally appointed a new Director of Public Health and Prevention, and that's Sam Crowe, who's our current Director of Public Health for all of Dorset. And I'd also like to acknowledge his immense work over many years, but also in actually supporting us through with this disaggregation. The decisions that are required are detailed in paragraph 12 of the report, around two key areas. One is that Live Well Dorset remains a pan-Dorset service and hosted by Dorset Council, and I think that's really because Live Well Dorset is a very recognised brand across both the BCP and the Dorset Council areas, and to dismantle that and start our own thing would be counterproductive. So I think it's really has got some sort of public recognition, and it's delivering a good service to thousands of people every year to help them stop smoking and have healthier approaches to their weight and physical activity and alcohol consumption, those sorts of areas. So the first decision for Cabinet is that remains a pan-Dorset service. And there's also various contract decisions as well. In the disaggregation, there's been a pragmatic approach that where possible, sort of contracts will be extended and will continue, while the two new directors of public health for each of the respective areas then work together to work out the sort of best way forward. And it lists in Appendix 1 that there are a number of contracts there which is recommended should be extended to maintain continuity of service. There, particularly the breastfeeding network, commissioned funding, some funding around Healthy Homes Dorset programme, targeted NHS health checks which are delivered through Live Well Dorset, and others around treating tobacco dependency. So if members are okay with that, that's really to note those the progression that we've made with public health disaggregation and to approve those decisions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Are there any other councillors wishing to speak on this from outside of Cabinet? Any in Cabinet want to speak? Go on then, Councillor Moore.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Leader. I'd just like to echo Councillor Brown's thanks to Sam Crowe for all the work that he's done for Dorset. And I'd also like to welcome the new director, looking forward to welcoming the new director for public health for BCP. Also, the staff transferring to Dorset to BCP. I just thought we ought to acknowledge that this is going to be a bit sort of disruptive for them. But obviously we will be giving them a really warm welcome because we are really grateful for them to come. So a warm welcome is assured. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, just very quickly, two things from me. What I was interested to hear about Councillor Brown getting all these text messages. I've had more text messages about appointments in the last 2 years than I've ever had before. So I reckon somebody in my surgery or somewhere knows that I'm on BCP Council and is concerned about my stress and blood pressure and stuff like that. Forgive me if I missed it when I dropped out for 30 seconds, but I just wanted to pay tribute to Gillian, Gillian Kay, our Director of Wellbeing, Corporate Director of Wellbeing. She's worked really hard on this. We've had a couple of conversations which are sort of peripheral, but to me really important. So I wanted to thank her for an amazing job. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Hadley?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I think it's really important actually that to recognise these are really specialist skills. It's a very specialist branch of medicine, and the team. I'm really pleased that Sam has retained the role within Dorset because I think he will add great value for our partners in Dorset Council, and it's always difficult to changing teams like that. The list at Appendix A is quite significant, and I think from a continuity perspective, it's absolutely pragmatic to do that. It does kind of leave me wondering of what things we're going to tease out and actually do separately, but some of them are quite important, I think, probably to consider on a more long-term basis, and obviously that will be for the two new directors of public health to work out between them. But the mapping, the mosaic piece, and the links there to the whole Dorset health and social care system, and in terms of what that's showing and how that's leading to the text messages that come through to you. And I was involved in some way in some of those things about how to hook them up and make them. There's a lot more detail behind that I could talk about, and then also the Healthy Homes Dorset, because we talked earlier about the social care housing stock and how we improve that. But the whole piece of work which we're certainly trying to do from a climate team perspective in looking at the own stock and privately rented stock, and that's a much bigger challenge in terms of how we deal with that. And I think the sort of work that Ridgewater Homes are doing in a shared way with our colleagues in Dorset is a really important area for us both. So I hope there will be continued opportunities to collaborate, and just because we've said we do want to control our own destiny and have our own team in our own meetings, which is really important and useful going forwards, I think the collaboration piece is equally important, and hopefully those two will get on like a house on fire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Any other councillors wishing to speak on this one? Councillor Brown, anything to add?
No, that's fine. I thank colleagues for their comments.
Right, we'll take this one to a vote. Can I see all those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you, that's unanimous. So on to agenda item 14, which is urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive in accordance with the Constitution. I am reliably informed that there have been none. Finally, we have agenda item 15, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. This was published last night and is part of the papers for this meeting today, and is also accessible online. Right, I think that is all that we have on our agenda today, and I can now formally close the meeting. Thank you, everyone.